So one of the most important, if not the most important aspect of dialing in your digital amp modeler is how you're sending your signal to your source, whether it be front of house, studio console, interface. And to be honest, I have been doing it wrong. And I'm really interested in this topic now because my friends from Radial, they sent out this Highline series passive line isolator, stereo and mono versions that are specifically designed for your amp modeler that has balanced quarter-inch outs. So if you're using a flagship modeler with XLR outs, probably don't need this, but if you're wanting to use quarter-inch outs or foolproof and dummy-proof your signal going to front of house, you're going to want to look into these line isolators. And this is kind of changing everything I know about setting my outputs to front of house. There's a lot of really good points and takeaways to this that I think I am going to be changing my workflow as far as building my presets. And if it's your first time here, my name is Steve Sterlacci. I do all things digital amp modeling on this channel, have a podcast centered around digital amp modeling called the Silent Stage Podcast, where I have pros on from all walks of life that use digital gear. So check that out below, subscribe if you haven't, and let's talk about this. So always the most important thing is gain staging. Gain staging's everything. Making your preset, setting your volume, whatever it is, if you're using an Iridium, something smaller, making sure that your volume is appropriate. I always typically try, and I've said this in other videos, but I try to keep my signal at or just above my bypass signal. So whatever I'm using, I'll make a preset, I'll make an amp and a cabinet sound, and then I'll turn them off and compare that to my dry DI guitar sound. And that's typically where I've always wanted to live. But what I've found with the Highline, the one-to-one Jensen transformer takes my perfectly crafted modeler tone that I spent so much time on, and it sends an exact one-to-one signal to front of house at the level it's intended to be heard at. What a regular DI box is going to do is it's going to take your signal, it's going to drop it down to microphone level, which is going to be a lot lower. And I'll show you this in a second with my guitar and plugging into my interface. So when you use a regular DI box, you're going to be more dependent on your source, whatever you're plugging into. Front of house engineer is going to have to gain you up. And now you're potentially introducing issues where you could have some signal to noise ratio issues where that gain being brought up could introduce noise if you're going through a crappy board or an inexperienced engineer. You can also get a lot of different hum and noise issues if you're not isolated properly. Most DI boxes will take care of all of that. And then you're just at the mercy of the sound guy and whatever he's doing with your signal as far as gaining it up goes. So the way I'm set up here, again, I have my touring pedal board on the floor. I have one, it's normally stereo out, but I'm doing this in mono. So one output's going to analog 3, one output is going to analog 4. Analog 4 is the Highline passive line isolator, and analog 3 is the DI box that I've been using for years, again, with no trouble, but I want to show you where line isolator is going to benefit you. So first thing you do, you plug in, they're asking you for a line check, right? So you see on analog 4, I'm getting that nice, really strong -20, but the old DI box is barely existent. So now I'm reliant on the sound engineer, and the board could be an expensive board. It could sound better with the board gain, or it could sound worse, or you could not take the chance and just give a good signal. So I'm going to have to now gain this up. You can see that those signals are round about the same. And now my gain is almost at noon on my interface. So now I've lifted my signal, I've boosted my signal from the input here. So now my gain is jacked up. This could also introduce more noise depending on your board, depending on the venue, whatever it is you're plugging into. Anytime you're dependent on bringing up gain, you have a risk of adding noise. And just for tonal differences, let's do an experiment here. So I'm actually going to flip the phase of one just so we could see if there's any tonal difference. So this is 3 and 4 with the phase swapped. So this should null out. So here there's no tone because that means that these are pretty much nulled out. I would say that that's close enough to be called the same. If I were to mute one out, maybe there is a slight difference. Let's see what. So that could be the coloration of the DI box, or it could be the coloration that the interface is adding, which you might want, you might not want. I particularly like to plug into things and have them be just done and set. So I would probably prefer to just use the line isolator and be done with it, sending a good strong signal, and go from there. So that's a look at how what the difference is when you're actually applying this in a real world. But I also want to talk about the stereo version, because this does a lot of really cool stuff that the mono version can't do, and that not many products can do this. So the stereo Highline allows you to sum both your through and your XLR. What the hell does that mean? So your through usually means that if you're going out to front of house, you're plugging in your XLRs that are going to the front of house. You can also use your through to go to an amp on stage, or your FRFR, your power cab, your Tonex cab, whatever it is that you're using. You can use a mono output to your on stage, or you can do stereo obviously too. And that normally would always give you some hum. Once you plug into that second or third source, that's when you start getting those weird ground loops. That's going to be no issue with this. But being able to sum to mono with your through is huge. So you can go to your speaker on stage without having any weirdness or losing any of your signal. And then you can also sum your XLR out. So if you happen to show up, you've got your board wired, you've got this hardwired, and they say there's not enough inputs for you, you have to go mono today. You can just hit this XLR sum and it'll sum your XLRs to mono also. So I definitely highly recommend the stereo DI, so that you can kind of future proof and situation proof yourself, and you'll always have the right tool for the job. Me personally, I usually run mine and Jessica's guitar rig, my wife. So I'll probably use the stereo and send us each through one of those channels, and we'll always have that nice, clean signal going to front of house. So I hope this brought some awareness on how you're supposed to be sending your signal to front of house. This is applicable to all of the modelers, whatever it is you're using, as long as it doesn't have XLR outputs, anything with 1/4 inch outs. You'll benefit from using this, and you'll have no problems. You'll definitely not have problems. So this is kind of what I'm going to be using now. I'm going to be changing it up and probably going through this line isolator, and this is how I'll be doing it. And thank you for watching. If you made it this far, I'll see you in the next one.